Now is also a good time to text your friends and make sure that they are coming to class. Right now we have a very, very small group. So we want to make sure that we have as many people as possible, especially because this is probably one of the most important lectures we've had so far and will have in the next upcoming weeks. So it's important that we are taking good notes and engaging with the material. Morning, Soraya, welcome. Great, we are gonna go ahead and get started, but first, can you please read out loud our materials for the day, Kayla? She might be having a technical issue. Giovanni, can you please read our materials for the day?
Google assignment pulled up, Nearpod access, all the tabs closed.
Beautiful, thank you so much. And Soraya, do you mind reading out loud our agenda for the day?
Norms and agenda, do now, lecture, and activity.
Thank you so much for you guys being on top of it. Okay, and as always, a reminder of our norms. We are all in our responses to cold call, and showing up on time will give us a 100% in a quiz grade every other week. Soraya and Giovanni just showed that they are now ready to get a 100%. As always, Zoom expectations, your video is on, your microphone is off, and we are only chatting when prompted. You guys are really great about this. Google Classroom is where you are going to find all assignments in the Nearpod links before class. As you'll see, I did post the link to the second half of the chapter 6 homework. So as always, this is going to be due on Thursday at 5 o'clock. Unfortunately, because of the meeting, I cannot be here for office hours to help you guys complete the first part if you did not, but if you complete the first half of the homework by 5 o'clock today, I will not count it as late. So if you have not had the chance to turn in your homework, please do so today. And finally, make sure you have a constructive learning space set up. Use your Chromebook and make sure you have all materials to take Cornell notes and you are in a place where you can take thorough Cornell notes. We're now going to transition to our Do Now, which is a multiple choice quiz in the Nearpod. It is for me to gauge how much information you guys know about the Constitutional Convention and what leads to the Constitutional Convention. So this hasn't been covered in your homework yet, but this is going to give me a preview on what we already know. So 3.5 minutes to answer 5 multiple choice questions. Go ahead and get started. Welcome, please join the Nearpod. We are doing a Do Now quiz. Sorry if that wasn't clear. The Do Now is in the Nearpod. Again, no stress. This is just for me to gauge and get an idea on what we already know. Just do your best. just under 2 minutes. Thank you guys so much for engaging actively with the quiz. We have 1 more minute to finish up. These questions also serve as a preview to what we are going to be discussing today. Thirty more seconds to finish up. That is 3 minutes. Thank you guys so much for interacting with that quiz. We all did a great job of just doing whatever we could, and I see a lot of correct answers in there. So we are now going to transition to today's lecture, which is called Building a Better Government, and we're covering the years of 1781 to 1789. Please take the next minute to set up your Cornell notes if you are taking paper Cornell notes. Again, the title is Building a Better Government, and make sure you have those years, 1781 to 1789, pulled up, written down. Please chat a 100 into the chat box when you are ready to start the lecture. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Arabia. Thank you, Soraya. Thank you, Jalasia. Thank you, Takia. Thank you, Shakeem. Okay, it looks like most of us are there, so let's go ahead and get started. Beginning with the first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation. So, after declaring independence, the nation had to settle in and develop a new government. But so far, this had only been an idea. They hadn't actually tried anything that was truly representative. And they had a lot of problems that they needed to solve with this first government. They needed to figure out how they would trade with foreign nations. So how is this new government going to trade with foreign nations? How are they going to deal with this war debt from the revolution? So how are they going to deal with this new debt from the revolution? And finally, how are they going to regulate the relationships between the different states? So how are they going to regulate these relationships between the different states? Which means how are they going to regulate the relationship between New York and New Jersey or Virginia and North Carolina? How is the federal government going to make sure that these states are treating each other properly? And their first solution is the Articles of Confederation. So again, that first solution is the Articles of Confederation, which was ratified, which means put into place, in 1781. So Articles of Confederation begins governing the United States in 1781. And this government, under the Articles of Confederation, gave most power to the states. So again, they gave most power to the states. And they had a very limited federal government. So a very limited federal government. And federal means national. So state governments under the Articles of Confederation had the most power, but the United States, the federal government of the United States, did not have much power. And under this government, there was no president, no federal courts, and the federal government could not enforce laws. So the federal government has no power to enforce laws. Give you 15 seconds to finish those notes on that slide. Which brings us to what we call a hot summer in Philadelphia. So as we just discussed, the Articles of Confederation created a very weak federal government and a very strong states government. And this creates the conditions for an event called Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion. In Western Massachusetts, a farmer and former American Revolution soldier named Daniel Shays led a rebellion against his local government. So again, a farmer and former soldier led a rebellion with other veterans against his local government. They believed that they were being unfairly taxed, so they were being taxed too much, and they also had not been paid enough for fighting in the revolution. So those were the two main grievances of Shays' Rebellion. They believed they were being unfairly taxed, and they had not been paid enough for fighting in the revolution. But because of the Articles of Confederation, the central or federal government lacked the power to put down the rebellion. So the United States did not have the power to put down the rebellion. and they had to rely on the wealthy citizens of Massachusetts to pay for troops to stop the rebellion. And what this uncovered was the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, because this showed that they were prioritizing states' rights over federal rights, or states' power over federal power. And so the founding fathers realized they needed to fix the Articles of Confederation or just start over. So in 1787, the Constitutional Convention begins. So the Constitutional Convention begins in 1787. And the founding fathers quickly realized that they could not revise the Articles of Confederation. They would have to create a new constitution. And now we are going to transition to what was done during the Constitutional Convention. So first we have the Great Compromise. The convention ended up being a series of compromises over issues from representation to slavery. Two plans for representation were put forward. The first is the New Jersey plan. And the New Jersey plan proposed that each state would be counted equally in its representation regardless of size. So what this means is Massachusetts would have the same number of representatives as Virginia, which would have the same number of representatives as New York. So again, each state counted equally in its representation regardless of size. So again, the New Jersey plan is a form of representation that will count each state equally regardless of its size. The second plan is the Virginia plan. And the Virginia plan suggested that representation should be based on population. So representation should be based on population, which means larger states would have more representatives. So Virginia would have more representatives than Delaware because they had a higher population. So again, these are the two main plans put forward for representation in the federal government. And ultimately, they decide on the Great Compromise. And the Great Compromise declares that the legislative branch, I'm going to spell that in the chat, legislative branch, okay, if you need help with the spelling, it is in the chat. they would create a legislative branch made up of 2 houses. So again, the Great Compromise, they agreed to create a legislative branch made up with 2 houses. This is what we know today as Congress. One house is the Senate. And they would have equal numbers of representatives from each state. So again, the Senate has equal numbers of representatives from each state. And the other house is the House of Representatives. House of Representatives, where representation would be based on state population. And so as we can see, the Great Compromise creates the Senate, which fulfills the New Jersey plan, and the House of Representatives, which appeals to the Virginia plan. And so our first compromise over representation has been taken care of. We're now going to look at the compromise over slavery. The other significant compromise from this convention is the 3/5 compromise, which deals with slavery. And the issue over slavery in the Constitutional Convention is how slavery would factor into representation for the states and states' populations. Southern states wanted enslaved people to be counted as persons, so they would get more representation in the House. So again, Southern states wanted enslaved people to be counted as persons, so they would gain more seats in the House. But the Northern states wanted enslaved people to be counted as property. So that way they would not be counted as a population for the South. And they would also, by being counted as property, help the North's tax rates. And so Congress decides to count 3/5 of the enslaved population towards representation and tax rates. So again, they agree to count 3/5 of the enslaved population when determining representation and tax rates. A related issue that was hanging over the proceedings was the international slave trade. So again, what is Congress going to do about the international slave trade? which had been condemned by many as immoral and as evil. But Congress decided that they would allow the international slave trade to continue in the United States for the next 20 years and decided that they could revisit the issue in 20 years. And as we know, these issues over slavery are going to continue to haunt the United States throughout its early history to today. We'll give you 10 more seconds to finish up your notes on slavery. We are now going to transition and look at the 6 big ideas of the Constitutional Convention. So again, we're going to go through 6 main ideas that are really influential during the Constitutional Convention as they create this new governing document. The first is a limited government. So the first issue is a limited government. And what this means is they want a political system where the government is restricted. So they want a political system where the government is restricted through powers specifically given to them. So again, they are restricted by powers specifically given to them, also known as enumerated powers. I'm putting enumerated powers into the chat in case you need help spelling it. So again, limited government, where the government is restricted through powers specifically given to them, also known as enumerated powers. And the reasoning for this is that people are the source of a government's power. And that the government only has as much power as the people give it. The next big idea is republicanism. And something I want to clarify is republicanism in this context is not the same as the Republican Party that we know today. Republicanism is a political theory, and the Republican Party is just a Republican Party that took their name from this. So not the same things at all. And what republicanism is a form of government in which leaders are elected for a specific group of people. So again, it's a form of government in which leaders are elected for a specific group of people for a specific amount of time. So again, electing a specific group of people for a specific amount of time. And the second piece of republicanism is that laws are passed to benefit all, not just a select few. So any laws passed under republicanism should benefit all people, not just a specific group. And the reasoning for this is because they know that the entire country will not have the same beliefs as each other. So this is why you have representatives from New York and representatives from Virginia and from all the different states in Congress. So that way they can represent the needs of those people. We're now going to go to the third key idea, which is the system of checks and balances. So checks and balances mean that each branch of the government has the ability to restrain the acts of the other two branches. So in the checks and balances system, the executive branch has power to override the actions of the judicial and the legislative. And the legislative has systems to limit the power of the executive and the judicial. So again, each branch has the ability to check the powers of the other. And the reason for this is because they wanted to make sure one branch did not get more power than the other two. So again, they want to make sure each branch is created equally. Which brings us to the fourth, which is federalism. And federalism is a system designed to split the powers between the state and federal levels of the government. And this allows the central government to be powerful enough to be effective. So remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the central government had no power. So under federalism, the central government has enough power to be effective. But it also allows states to handle local issues. So again, it allows states to handle local issues. Which brings us to our fifth, which is the separation of powers. So separation of powers is this idea that the federal government should be split between three branches. So in the United States, we have a federal government that has three branches. The first is the executive, which we know as the president. So if I said executive branch, you should immediately think president. The next is the judicial branch, which refers to the Supreme Court. And finally, we have the legislative, which refers to Congress, which, as we know, consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And again, each branch has a very specific set of duties that they have to govern the United States. And finally, the last piece that the Founding Fathers wanted from the Constitutional Convention was popular sovereignty. And popular sovereignty means that the government is created at the will of the people. Which means whatever power the people give the government, they can also take that power away. Okay, and we have one last slide. So again, last slide. So, as we've seen through these six big ideas of the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers were really trying to think through how they could create a government that also did not become tyrannical. But a continuing debate throughout the Constitutional Convention was how they could protect individual rights. So how are the Founding Fathers going to protect individual rights? And under this political debate, two groups formed. We have the Anti-Federalists. So the first group is the Anti-Federalists, who believed that specific rights should be protected in the Constitution. And one of the most famous Anti-Federalists is Thomas Jefferson. And the other group is the Federalists, who argued that specific protections were not needed. And two of the most famous Federalists are Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. So again, two famous Federalists, Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. Ultimately, the Anti-Federalists won. And in 1791, the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights is added to the Constitution in 1791. These are known as the first 10 amendments. Again, the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments. And these protect fundamental rights, such as freedom of religion, speech, or privacy. However, these political divisions are going to continue into the administrations of the first presidents, as we will see when we take a closer look at Federalists and Anti-Federalists next week. Give you 30 seconds to finish up. And in the Nearpod, please take the next 2 minutes to respond to this, 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond to this question. Tell the story of the Constitution. What happened? Use at least 3 terms. 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond. One more minute for your response. Great, thank you, Jalasia. Thank you, Giovanni. Ten more seconds, go and start submitting whatever you have. Great, thank you, you guys. We're now going to transition to your exit ticket. Once I announce that it has been submitted, you are free to go. As a reminder, your homework for part 2 is due Thursday night at 8 o'clock. I will be monitoring the exit ticket and releasing you as soon as I see responses. Caleb, you may go. Jalasia, you may go. Great thorough responses in the open response. Kayla, you may go. Make sure we're carefully reading the question. You're looking for the multiple choice question. You are looking to see what are the problems of the Articles of Confederation. So what are the problems of the Articles of Confederation except? Shakeem, you may go. Mahmoud, you may go. So again, for number one, all of those are aspects of the Articles of Confederation, but which one is not a problem? Just make sure we're carefully reading it.
Miss
Giovanni,
Wild,
hi, Kayla, what's up?
I just did an exit ticket. You told me that I did it, but I refreshed my Google Classroom and it's saying that it's not marked as done. It's like it's still signed.
So whenever you submit the exit ticket, it doesn't look at like the whole assignment. So like it says that it's not done until you submit photos of your classwork, of your class notes. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Of
okay.
your exit ticket.
Okay.
So like the Google Forms don't sync up with the classroom assignment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So you want my notes from today and you already have my exit ticket?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, I have your exit ticket, and yes, please, I want your notes.
Okay. All right. Have a good day, Miss Wild.
Thank you. You too. Giovanni, I have yours. Okay, it is 8:50. Let's go ahead and work on finishing up so you guys can enjoy your break between classes. Tisa, Alexis, I have yours. You may go. Skyanne, I have yours. You may go. Everybody that's still on the call, are you guys just finishing up or do you have questions? Leah, I just got yours. You may go. Thank you, Arabia, for letting me know. Thank you, Takia. I have yours. Arabia, I just got yours. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the Zoom call so that way you guys can get a break from Zoom. I will see you guys tomorrow.